Okay, so if you were absent on Monday or joined my class late, one of the things you'll need in your notes for your notebook check is this flip chart. We did it in class, so hopefully most of you have this. But if you actually look in the book on page 307, you'll see a chart in your book that looks pretty similar to this. There's a couple of things that I've added. So this is the hierarchy of all of the quadrilaterals. Notice that I have the word quadrilateral at the beginning, and this is just a general quadrilateral. Okay, and then from that quadrilateral has 3 branches. Okay, this branch represents all the quadrilaterals that have 0 parallel lines, and there's only one thing that does that, and it's a kite. This branch represents all the quadrilaterals that have 1 pair of parallel sides, and they are all called trapezoids. But the reason why there's 3 and not just 1 is because we have the general trapezoid, but then we have 2 special kinds of trapezoids. One that's called an isosceles trapezoid, and one that's called a right trapezoid. Okay. Then we have the 3rd branch, which you're going to have to go over to the other page for, and this is all the quadrilaterals that has 2 pairs of parallel sides. And anything that has 2 pairs of parallel sides is called a parallelogram. What branches off from that is a rectangle and a rhombus. And then if you put both those definitions together, you get what we call a square. Now I'm going to zoom in on these so you can see what I've done to create these shapes. Okay. Okay. I'm getting a lot of glare from the sun in my kitchen table, so let's move a little bit. Okay. Alright, so when you're making these shapes, you need to make them look nearly exactly the way I've made mine look. There's very method to the way I've created my shapes. Notice my quadrilateral has no 90-degree angles and no congruent sides. It's very important that your quadrilateral has no 90-degree angles and no congruent sides. If it does, it might fall into one of these subcategories, which wouldn't be an accurate diagram. Okay? As far as the size, your shapes need to be as big as mine. They can be bigger as long as they can fit on the page. I don't mind if you make them bigger than mine, but they cannot be smaller than mine. We're going to be adding a lot of information to this chart, so you're going to need the room to write. Quadrilateral doesn't have to be that big. Notice it's smaller than the other shapes because there's not a lot of theorems, there's not a lot of relationships that it has, because obviously there's nothing special about it. All it is a polygon with 4 sides. Now we are going to be writing the definition of all of these shapes on the underside. Do not write the definition in this white space right here. You want to write it on the back side of the shape, and all of the theorems that we're going to add to it is going to go here. A couple of things to point out. Notice the way I taped this. Do not cover up any of the corners with tape. It will not flip correctly. Okay, so make sure you're taping along one of the edges and do not cover up any of the corners. The second thing is, after I've taped it down, notice I outlined the shape. That way when you do write underneath it, you know where to stop. Okay, so that's some important things about these shapes. Okay, so that's the quadrilateral. Then you have the trapezoid. The quadrilateral is 1 pair of parallel sides. Then you have the isosceles trapezoid. It's a trapezoid with 2 congruent legs. Notice this definition starts with this word. So that means that all of the characteristics of this also apply to this. Okay, that's very important wording. You'll see that pattern throughout the entire chart today. Okay, again, a right trapezoid. The very first word in the definition is going to say that it is a trapezoid with 2 90-degree angles. So that means all the characteristics of this have to match the characteristics of that. Then we go over to the kite. Remember, a kite has no parallel sides. Its definition is a quadrilateral with 2 pair of consecutive congruent sides. I think in the book I think they use the word adjacent. Adjacent and consecutive are pretty similar. Consecutive just means next to, and so does adjacent. It means they're in a row. So instead of the sides being opposite, these sides are next to each other. These two are congruent and those two are congruent. So make sure your shape looks like that. Okay? Actually, let me write that down. Where's my pen? This is congruent to that, and this one is congruent to that. And we can add that to the right trapezoid if we want to, the 90-degree angles. And I had already done it on that side. Okay, on to the next page. Okay, this is that third branch from the quadrilateral. Okay, this is two pairs of parallel sides. Quadrilateral with two pairs of parallel sides. Okay, rectangle. Okay. Definition is that it's a parallelogram with four 90-degree angles. So we can draw those 90-degree angles in if we want. And the rhombus. Parallelogram. Again, we're starting with this word. That means that all of the rules for this one have to apply to that one as well. And this one has four congruent sides. A lot of people try to call this a diamond. I know they do that in the elementary schools, but the proper name for it is a rhombus, so please start calling it a rhombus and not a diamond. Alright, now, you might see a different definition than I wrote here in the book. I just tried to simplify things a little bit. I just wrote that a square is a rhombus and a rectangle, because I didn't see the need of rewriting both definitions. If you have a shape that fits this definition and that definition, then it's a square. Okay? So this one has 90-degree angles and congruent sides. Okay, and that's your flip chart. Also notice the color coordination. Please do that. I don't care what four colors you pick, but make the quadrilateral one color by itself, and that represents the general shape, and then pick three colors for your three branches. Okay?